All right. So the first response that I have, a big takeaway, was from chapter 4 in the clay text. And I have been doing running records for several years. I do guided reading. I find it very valuable, but I've almost lost a little bit of like the why behind it because I've known I'm missing something. And so while I read this text and the Fontes and Pinnell text, I felt called to do more than what I've been doing. Um, I have been basically looking at the fluency, looking at the error rate, looking at words per minute, and then checking comprehension. And so very basic analysis um, if their words were below what I would like to see in a minute, but their accuracy was there, I would just work on like, let's speed up that reading. If their comprehension wasn't there, but the fluency was, then we would talk about some comprehension strategies. And that was basically my technique for guided reading. I had one of two goals. Am I working on the fluency to get those words up per minute, or am I working on the comprehension? And while I read this text, both Clay and Fontes and Pinnell, my big takeaway was it's so much more than that. These running records can show that, yes, we can do fluency and comprehension, but we can also have a need to work on the word study, the vocabulary, and within fluency, so much more than just words per minute. So I guess one of the biggest takeaways from the clay text was having a very clear coding while doing a running record. I love that because I've never been able to really conference with anyone else and get their input on the analysis. And so having a similar coding would allow that discussion, and we can talk about what I saw if I'm very explicit with all of the notes that I'm taking. The next thing that I loved about the clay text is really focusing on the self-correction ratio. I have only looked at self-correction as, oh, they noticed they had an error. But I loved the point that was made with if there is too much self-correction, they won't be able to process. It's just too much information. And if I remember correctly, that was actually from the Fontes and Pinnell text. Both the Fontes and Pinnell and the clay. A second big takeaway is the error analysis of the meaning, the syntax, and the visual cues. This is something that I really need to focus on. I would really like to take some of these running records and look for, are you listening for the meaning? Is the syntax of what you're saying even making sense? And are you breaking down the words so that you can decode them? Are you looking at just the first letter and then making a guess? Or are you sounding out every single letter in that word all the way through the end, not just using the beginning part of the word? That can help me in forming my groups. So that word study component, the decoding of it. I loved in the Fontes and Pinnell how they gave next steps, so I could see some examples. Things like that, where you have a reader that is using visual cues, but maybe just in the beginning, or specifically one that reminded me of a student that I have right now, who when they get to a hard word or a longer multisyllabic word, they just kind of wait for it to be told to them. So working with them on how to attack those words and be a little bit more independent with their reading. So overall, the two big takeaways were error analysis with the meaning, syntax, and visual cues, and realizing that forming groups is so much bigger than fluency and comprehension, and now learning what to do with that. So